Okay, so let's start. We want to start a new topic, and our new topic is called errors and their correction. Now, as an accountant, as you keep entering the transactions in the books, there are some errors you may commit in the recording of your transactions. So we want to look at what are some of the types of errors that you may commit in the recording of the transactions in the books. The errors that may be committed in the recording of the transactions in the books may be classified into two categories. I've said all types of errors that you may commit in the recording of transactions, they may be classified into two categories. That means there are two types of errors or two categories of errors. One, there are those errors which when you commit them, the trial balance will still balance. You as an accountant or as a business, you committed an error in the recording of the transactions, but when the time of extracting a trial balance comes, you still realize the trial balance has balanced, and yet you committed an error. Don't forget what we discussed on how to prepare trial balance. You know trial balance has a debit column and it has a credit column. And so when you add the two totals, you realize the two columns are agreeing. Yet somewhere you committed an error. So we have one type of errors which when they are committed, the trial balance will still balance. That means those errors are not disclosed by the trial balance, not disclosed by the trial balance. You still have committed them, but the trial balance will still balance. The second type of errors are those that when you as a company you commit them, the trial balance will not balance. So those trial errors are disclosed by the trial balance. By the trial balance. So we are saying there are those which errors that you may commit, but they will never be disclosed by the trial balance. By the trial balance. The trial balance will still balance. And there are those errors which when you commit them, the trial balance will never balance, meaning the errors will be disclosed by the trial balance. Okay, so let me start with those kind of errors which when you commit them as a business, the trial balance will still balance. So we want to start with the first category, errors not disclosed by the trial balance. Let me first discuss them. Errors not disclosed by the trial balance, which means as a business, you have still committed them, but your trial balance will still balance. Your trial balance will still balance. What are some of the examples of such errors? Now, we have different types of errors, which when they are committed, the trial balance will still balance. One of them is what we call error of omission. Error of omission. Now, assuming your business had something like cash sales. Cash sales, shillings 2,000. Which account are you supposed to debit? Obviously, you're supposed to debit cash and you credit sales. But if you don't record that transaction anywhere, meaning you still don't debit sales, you still don't credit sales, the trial balance will still balance because of the other entries. So will you ever know that you committed this error where you omitted the recording of a transaction completely? You did not debit an account, you did not credit an account, you omitted this transaction. The trial balance will still balance with the other transactions. Okay, the other transactions that you recorded will make the trial balance to still balance, but you have committed an error. Okay, so that's what we are calling one type of error, which when you commit them as a business, the trial balance will still balance, and that is what we are calling error of omission. We are saying it occurs when a transaction is completely omitted from the recording in the books when a transaction is completely omitted from the recording of in the books of accounts. Completely means you don't debit, you don't credit. I am not saying that you sold goods by cash and you debited cash and you forgot to credit sales. In that case, when you debit cash and you credit sales, the trial balance will not balance. Why? Because you debited sales, cash, and cash being a debit balance, it will affect the debit. But the transaction was not affecting the credit, because sales is an income. An income is always a credit balance. So if you did not credit sales, then the trial balance will never balance. Or maybe you credited sales and you forgot to debit cash. The trial balance will never balance. But where you completely omitted the recording of that transaction, the trial balance will still balance. Are you there? Good. That's one type of error. Another type of error that when you commit it, the trial balance will still balance is what we call error of commission. We call it error of commission. Error of commission. Which kind of an error is this? Let me explain it. It's an error which occurs. You record a transaction. You record a transaction in the wrong account. In the wrong account, but of the same class. I'll explain. Where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account, but of the same class. For example, when you pay electricity, you're supposed to debit electricity account. That's obvious. Maybe by 2000, whatever it is. What if your company forgot and debited telephone account by the same 2000? Will the trial balance balance? You paid electricity by cash. Of course, cash was credited. But instead of debiting the account of electricity, your company debited the account of telephone. Will your account still balance? Yes, your account will still balance. Because telephone, where you have posted it, is in the same class as electricity. They are both expenses. So, and they are both debit balances. Okay? So the trial balance will still balance. Or you bought a motor vehicle, and instead of recording it in the motor vehicle account, you recorded it in the furniture account. So you're committing an error you're recording an error in the wrong account, but of the same class. The class of assets of accounts, you remember we discussed different types of accounts. We have asset account, liability accounts, expense account, capital account, revenue account, and so on. When we were doing the topic of double entry, we classified the various types of accounts. An expense account, a liability account, an asset account, an expense capital account, and a revenue account. So where you record a transaction in the wrong account, but of the same class, the trial balance will still balance. The trial balance will still balance. Okay? I've given you an example where electricity paid is recorded in the telephone, or a purchase of motor vehicle recorded in the machinery account. That's an error of commission. Okay? That's an error of commission. We go to the third one. And the third one is what we call error of principle. Error of principle. Okay? Now listen. This occurs again where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account of a different class. In the wrong account of a different class. Where a transaction is recorded in a wrong account of a different class. Let me give you an example. When you paid electricity, you are supposed to debit electricity account. by 2,000. But now you forgot, and instead of debiting electricity, you debited machinery by 2,000. You are supposed to debit electricity, but instead of debiting electricity, you debited machinery. Will the trial balance still balance? Yes, the trial balance will still balance. But have you committed an error? Yes. You are supposed to have debited electricity account, which is an expense, but you debited asset account. So these two accounts are in different class. They are in different class. So you have committed an error of principle. We are saying it's an error that occurs when a transaction is recorded in the wrong account, in a wrong account of a different class. Could be you paid or you purchased a motor vehicle and it was recorded in the sales account. Motor vehicle is an asset. You recorded in a sales account, which is a revenue account. Or maybe you paid or you bought machinery. But instead of debiting machinery, now you debited telephone. They are in different class. So you are recording the transaction in the wrong account of a different class. That's an error of what? Principle. Okay? Another type of error which when you commit it, the trial balance will still balance is what we call error of original entry. Error of original entry. Error of original entry. This occurs where you record a transaction in the correct account. In the correct accounts, but with wrong amount. With the wrong amount. For example, when there is sales, cash sales of 2,000, which is recorded as shillings 200 in the books. So what did you do? You recorded a cash sales of 2,000 as 200. So it's obvious you debited cash by 200. You credited sales by 200. Will the trial balance still balance? Yes, the trial balance will still balance. Though the amounts are wrong, but the trial balance will still balance. The trial balance will still balance. So these are an error that you have committed and you have entered the transaction in the correct accounts or in the right accounts, but with the wrong amount. But with the wrong amount. When a transaction is recorded in the correct accounts, but with the wrong amount. The keyword there is correct accounts, wrong amount. That's what we are calling an error of original entry. An error of original entry. Good. Let me go to number 5. Another type of error, when you commit it, the trial balance would still balance. The trial balance will still balance. We call it error, or maybe I can call it this way. Error of complete, let me put it that way. Error of complete reversal of entries. Error of complete reversal of entries. Error of complete reversal of entries. Meaning, an account you should have debited, you credited. And another account you should have credited, you debited. You reversed the entry. You have still followed the double entry, but on the wrong side. For example, cash sales. What should be the recording? You sold goods for cash for 2,000. You're supposed to debit cash by 2,000. What if you did not debit cash by 2,000? Instead, you credited cash by 2,000. You are supposed to credit sales by 2,000, but what if you debited sales by 2,000? Will the trial balance? Yes, it will still balance. You have recorded the transaction by reversing the entries. An account that should have been debited instead was credited, and an account that was supposed to be credited, which is sales, you debited. That's still an error you have committed. But the trial balance will still balance because you have followed the double entry. And by the way, to correct this error, what do you do? What do you think? If I'm to correct this error, for example, if I'm to correct this error, what do you think? If I'm to correct this error, I want to correct this error. Will I come and debit the cash account? Listen, will I come and debit the cash account by 2,000? We are saying you are supposed to debit cash, but instead you credited cash. You are supposed to credit sales by 2,000, but instead you debited sales. The trial balance will still balance. If you are to correct this error, my question is, can I come and debit sales by 2,000 and I credit? Can I debit cash by 2,000 and credit sales by 2,000? The answer is no. Why? Because if you do that, you have only cancelled the error. But have you corrected it? No. If you just debit 2,000 in the cash book or in the cash account, that now entry, which is a debit, will cancel the credit, and therefore it's like you have not made any entry in the cash book. Which means you should now come and again debit by another 2,000, so that one of them will be to cancel this error, the other entry will be to correct the error. Same to the sales. If you credit once only by 2,000, what have you done? You have only cancelled the debit here. But have you corrected it? No. So what do you do to correct it? You come and credit. So we are saying for a complete reversal of entries, if you want to correct that error, you double the amount. But if it was here, error of original entry, where I'm supposed to have debited cash by 2,000 and credited sales by 2,000, instead I recorded it as 200. So I debited cash by 200, sorry. If I'm to correct that error, I should come back to the cash book and now make this debit at 2,000, not at 200. To make it at 2,000, I come and increase it by another how much? 18. And I credit also sales by how much? Another 18. So that the original 200 credit and the other 18 now will come to a total of 2,000. Okay? That is if it was an error of original entry. But we are saying for a complete reversal of entries, you double the amount. So that one amount will cancel the error, the other one will be to correct the error. I hope you are following. One will be to cancel the error, the other one will be to correct the error. So that's all for number 5. We go to number 6. Another type of error which when you commit it, the trial balance will still balance. We call it compensating errors. Compensating errors. Let me explain. Sorry, where is it? Trial balance, where we began here. This is your trial balance. It has a debit column and it has a credit column. Listen. If one item on the debit was overcasted, and another item on the credit here, whichever it is also overcasted, will the trial balance still balance? Yes. Listen, I'm not saying whether it will balance with the correct totals here. The totals may be wrong, but still the trial balance will balance. Still the trial balance will still do what? Balance. But the total is wrong, but we still see the trial balance as balance. So we are saying if one item on the debit of the trial balance is overcasted and another item on the credit of the trial balance is also overcasted, the trial balance will balance. So this kind of error is what we are calling a compensating error, which means it's like the two errors are cancelling each other. The overcasting of the debit and the overcasting of the credit, they are cancelling each other. Or it could be something you undercasted. You undercasted an item on the debit of the trial balance, and you also undercasted an item on the credit of the trial balance. Would the trial balance still balance? Yes. But have you committed an error? Yes. So we are not looking at the right total, whether the total is right or wrong. We are looking at, is the trial balance still balancing? Yes, it is balancing. So we are committing an error of compensating, where we are saying where two or more, listen, two or more errors, when they cancel out each other. For example, if your rent account here on the debit of the trial balance is overcasted by 1,000, listen, and your sales account which is on the credit is overcasted by 600, and your capital account which is always on the credit is overcasted by 400, you have committed three errors. Your debit is overcasted by 1,000, maybe an item on the debit, and two items on the credit are overcasted, one by 400, another one by 600. So in total, yes, the debit is overcasted by 1,000, and in total, the credit is overcasted by 1,000, though the credit, there are two items that were affected. They will still cancel each other. So a compensating error, we are saying, will occur where two or more errors cancel out each other. Where two or more errors cancel out each other. Good. So these are errors you should remember. These are errors you should remember because sometimes your questions will tell you to state the errors which, when they are committed, the trial balance will not balance. Good. So before we go to the second type of errors, let's put down something on what we have said. So the topic is errors and their correction. So put down that topic, errors and their correction. That is the topic, errors and their correction. Then we put down those types of errors we have discussed. Let's put them down. Let's put them down. So maybe another subheading, types of errors. Types of errors as a subheading. Type of errors. Types of errors. Number one. Types of errors. Number one. Errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Number one. Errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Two, errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Then below that, have another subheading, errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are not disclosed by the trial balance. Then you say this. These are errors. These are errors which, when they are committed, these are errors which, when they are committed, the trial balance will still balance. These are errors which, when they are committed, the trial balance would still balance. The trial balance would still balance. The trial balance would still balance. These are errors which, when they are committed, the trial balance would still balance. The trial balance would still balance. Let's mention them. Number one, error of omission. Put it down. Number one, error of omission. error of omission. Then you say this, error of omission. Then you say this. This occurs where a transaction is completely. This occurs where a transaction is completely, underline the keyword there, where a transaction is completely omitted. That's the keyword, underline that. Where a transaction is completely omitted in the books of accounts. Where a transaction is completely omitted in the books of accounts. Where a transaction is completely omitted in the books of accounts, i.e., no debit or credit entry is made, i.e., where no debit or credit entry is made. Where no debit or credit entry is made. Where no debit or credit entry is made. E.g., cash sales of shillings 2,000. Cash sales of shillings 2,000 was completely omitted. Cash sales of shillings 2,000 was completely omitted in the books of accounts. Cash sales of shillings 2,000 was completely omitted in the books of accounts. So that's number one. Let's go to number two now. Error of commission. Error of commission. So let's put down number two. Error of commission. Error of commission. Then you say this. This occurs. Error of omission. This occurs. Error of commission. This occurs. This is error of commission. Error of commission. Then you say this occurs where a transaction is recorded. Where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account. Where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account of the same class. In a wrong account of the same class. In the wrong account but of the same class. Maybe you can put it that way. In a wrong account but of the same class. In a wrong account where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account but of the same class. So you're underlining the word wrong account and also the same class. Underline that. You're underlining wrong account and you're also underlining the same class. E.g., electricity paid of shillings 2,000. Electricity paid of shillings 2,000 recorded. Electricity paid of shillings 2,000 recorded in the telephone account. Recorded in the telephone account. Recorded in the telephone account. And by the way, let me ask you, if you are to correct this error, what do you think you will do? Let's just mention before we go to number three. You had electricity you paid of 2,000, which was recorded in the telephone account. So we want to remove the error from where? From the telephone and take it where? To electricity. Are you following? I want to correct this error. I made an error. I debited telephone by 2,000 instead of debiting electricity. So to remove the error, I just come and credit the telephone by 2,000 to remove it from that account. And now I come and debit what? The correct account. 2,000 for what? For electricity. For electricity by 2,000. So if you are to correct that error, I would have credited telephone and I would have debited electricity. To debit electricity means now you are correcting. To credit telephone, you are removing the debit that you made in that account. Good. So let's go to number 3 now. Let's go to number 3, error of principle. Put it down. Error of principle. Error of principle. Error of principle. Error of principle. Then you say this. This occurs, error of principle, this occurs where an entry is recorded. Where an entry is recorded in the wrong account. In a wrong account, but of a different class. This occurs where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account of a different class. In a wrong account of a different class. In a wrong account of a different class. In a wrong account of a different class. Underline the word wrong account, and then also underline different class, where a transaction is recorded in the wrong account but of a different class. E.g. paid electricity shillings 2,000, paid electricity shillings 2,000, paid electricity shillings 2,000, but the amount paid electricity of shillings 2,000, but the amount being debited, in the machinery account. Paid electricity of shillings 2,000, but the amount being debited in the machinery account. But the amount being debited in the machinery account. Of course, that's an error. So we have seen the machinery account is an expense. No, machinery account is an asset, sorry, and electricity is an expense. Okay? Again, listen. You paid electricity, you should have debited electricity, but instead you debited machinery. So how do you correct this error, by the way? To correct it, of course, I have to remove the error by crediting machinery, and of course I debit the correct account. So for now, I'm not doing the correction. I'm only explaining that in case you are to correct. Good. That's number 3. Let's go to number 4. Number 4, error of original entry. Number 4, error of original entry. Let's put down the note. What is an error of original entry? Error of original entry. Semi-V. This occurs where a transaction is recorded. Where a transaction is recorded in the correct accounts. Where a transaction is recorded in the correct accounts, but with the wrong amount. Where a transaction is recorded in the correct account, but with the wrong amount. So underline correct account, underline wrong amount. Good. E.g. cash sales shillings 2,000, cash sales shillings 2,000, recorded as cash sales shillings 2,000, recorded as shillings 200. Cash sales of shillings 2,000, recorded as shillings 200. Good. Of course, I talked about how to correct it. You can see it here. We debited cash by 200. We credited sales by 200. But it was supposed to be 2,000. So we increased the amount with whatever the amount. Okay. It could be to reduce. It could be to increase, whatever it is. But ours in this illustration is to increase. Good. That's number 3. That's number 4. Sorry. Let's go to number 4. Number 5, sorry. Number 5. 5. Error of complete reversal. Error of complete reversal of entries. 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 Then you see this. This occurs where an account that should have been debited. This occurs where an account that should have been debited is credited. This occurs where an account that should have been debited is credited. And an account that should have been credited is debited. And an account that should have been credited is debited. E.g., cash sales of shillings 2,000. E.g., cash sales of shillings 2,000 debited in the sales account. Cash sales of shillings 2,000 debited in the sales account, debited in the sales account and credited in the cash account. E.g., cash sales of shillings 2,000 that is debited in the sales account and credited in the cash account. Good. So obvious, I talked about how to correct. I told you double the amount. We are not discussing how to correct now. We shall do that later. But now we are trying to say, if you are to correct this error, you double the amount. So that one amount will cancel the error. The other one will be to correct the error. So that's all for that. Let's go to number 6. Number 6, call it compensating errors. Compensating errors. Then you say this. Compensating errors. Then you say this. This occurs where two or more errors cancel out each other. This occurs where two or more errors cancel out each other. This occurs where two or more errors cancel out each other. E.g., I've said this occurs where two or more errors cancel out each other. Then you say e.g., sales account being undercasted. Sales account being undercasted by shillings 2,000. Sales account being undercasted by shillings 2,000. And purchases account also being undercasted. And purchases account also being undercasted by shillings 2,000. And purchases account also being undercasted by shillings 2,000. Good. So one item on the debit, which is the purchases, it's undercasted by 2,000. One item on the credit of the trial balance, which is sales, also being overcasted by 2,000 or undercasted by 2,000. The trial balance will still balance. Good. Now let me continue now. So we are through with the first category of errors. So let me introduce the second category of errors now. Let me introduce the second categories of errors. These are errors that are disclosed. Errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Meaning, when you commit them, the trial balance will still balance. Will never balance, sorry. The trial balance will never balance. Okay? So you can even put down that information and the under that subtopic. So you can put down the subtopic first. Errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Errors that are disclosed by the trial balance. Then you say this. These are errors. These are errors which when they are committed. These are errors which when they are committed, the trial balance will not balance. The trial balance will not balance. Okay, let me give you a few examples first. We don't have specific errors. Listen to this now. There are no specific errors that can be called a given name. No. But these are just errors you can think of that you as a business you could have made and the trial balance still does not balance. Listen, if for example you have cash sales, don't write this. If you have cash sales of shillings 2,000, but listen, but only recorded as a debit in cash account. Meaning you did not credit sales. Will the trial balance balance? No. So when a transaction is recorded, we are giving a simple example, which means I can say single entry. You know every transaction must have a double entry, a debit and a credit. But if you had a single transaction in that account transaction, you had a single entry only, either you debited cash and you did not credit sales, or maybe you could have credited sales and you forgot to debit cash, the trial balance will never balance. The trial balance will never balance. Okay? Good. That's one type of an example of an error. Another example is what we call arithmetic error. Arithmetic error. Arithmetic error. Listen, we did the topic, for example, of, listen, books of original entry. And I told you the totals of those day books, you post them to the ledger accounts. The totals of the day book, you post them to the ledger accounts. And it's from the ledger accounts that you prepare a trial balance. Listen. So if one of the day books, for example, the sales day book, the total down there is supposed to be 30,000. But instead of recording 30,000 in the sales account, you recorded, or when you are adding, let's assuming in your sales day book here, let me just assume this is your sales day book. Don't forget we had a column for amount, whatever it is. When you are adding these accounts of the various customers, the datas, you added them wrongly and you got 20,000 instead of 25. This 20,000, you obviously posted it to the sales account. But it's wrong. Why is it wrong? Because you added these figures wrongly. So if there is arithmetic error, we are picking, for example, in the journals. And when you are adding this journal, these totals, you got a total of 20. You took that 20 to the credit sales account if this was a sales day book. But the correct amount maybe was supposed to be 25. So will the trial balance balance? No. So if there is such an arithmetic error, then the trial balance will never balance. The trial balance will never balance. Where we are saying, where we are giving an example, where wrong totals are posted. Wrong totals are posted to the ledger accounts. Okay? You post the wrong totals from the journals to the wrong, to the right, to the correct account, but the wrong amount. Good. Remember, the other entries were right. The other entries were right. It's only the total that you posted wrongly. Good. That's number 2. Another example. We are giving examples. I'm not saying these are the only examples that can cause. No. There are many examples of transactions or errors that can occur, but the trial balance will never balance. We are only giving a few because we cannot give specific examples of errors. No. Good. What could be another transaction? Listen. If, for example, you had cash sales of 2,000, listen, but cash was debited by 2,000, sales was credited. Here, sales was credited by 200 with the trial balance. You had cash sales of 2,000. You debited cash by correct amount 2,000. But when you, as an accountant, you are going to record it in the sales account, you credited as 200. The trial balance will never balance. So we are saying where a transaction is recorded using different amounts. The transaction was for 2,000, but you record it using different amount. One entry is 2,000, the other one is 200. Good. So those are some of the examples of errors which when you commit them, the trial balance will never balance. Good. So let's put down something on that. Sema hivi, another paragraph. Examples of these types of errors are examples of these types of errors are number one, error of single entry. E.g. error of single entry, e.g. cash sales shillings 2,000, cash sales of shillings 2,000 recorded in the cash book only, or in the cash account only, recorded in the cash account only. Cash sales of shillings 2,000 recorded in the cash account only, but not in the sales account. That's one example. Number 2, another example. Number 2, arithmetic error. Then you say this, arithmetic error, e.g. where a total of a journal, stroke daybook, where a total of a journal or daybook, where a total of the daybook or journal is either undercasted or overcasted. Where a total of the daybook or journal is undercasted or overcasted. Therefore, or thereby, or maybe you could say thereby, transferring the wrong amount. to the ledger accounts, thereby transferring the wrong amount to the ledger accounts. Number 3, another example. 3, another example. Put it this way. Number 3, where a transaction is recorded. Where a transaction is recorded using different amounts. 3, where a transaction is recorded using different amounts. Using different amounts. Where a transaction is recorded using different amounts. E.g. cash sales of shillings 2,000. E.g. cash sales of shillings 2,000 recorded. E.g. cash sales of shillings 2,000 recorded in the cash account. E.g. cash sales of shillings 2,000 recorded in the cash account as shillings 2,000, but in the sales account, as shillings 200. But in the sales account as shillings 200. But in the sales account as shillings 200. Good. Let me continue now. I've given you a few examples of errors which, when they are committed, the trial balance will never balance. Now listen. I'm developing now. Now listen. You are extracting this trial balance, you as a company. By the end of the year, listen, once you keep posting the transactions in the ledger accounts, we have done the topic of balancing accounts, extracting a trial balance. That's the topic we did in the concept of double entry. It was among the first topics. Now listen. You have extracted this trial balance. You went to the cash account, you found the balance, whatever it was. You went to the sales account, you got the balance. It is normally a credit balance. You went to the capital account that you prepared, you normally got the balance, whatever it is. And you did all that for the other accounts. Listen. Once you transferred the balances of the ledger accounts to the trial balance, of course you know, if an item has a debit balance in the account, we normally put it on that balance on the debit column of the trial balance. If an item has a credit balance in the account, we normally take it to the credit column of the trial balance. That is something you should know. When an item is a credit balance like capital. Now listen. So by the end of the year, you normally extract a trial balance. Suppose you realize that when you added this debit column of the trial balance, you got it as 2 million. But when you are adding the credit column of the trial balance, you now realize coming to 1.8 million. It is obvious you must have committed an error. You must have committed an error. That's why the trial balance is not balancing. What do you do? Listen, what do you do? Do you go back and look for the errors that you have committed? Remember, listen, by the end of the year, you're supposed to prepare your profit and loss or the income statement. But when you realize the trial balance has not balanced, are you required to go looking for the transaction that made the trial balance not to balance? No. Listen, it might take you so long to locate the error because there are millions and many transactions that are recorded during the year in your company. So you can't go through each of them again looking for where you made an error or where you committed the error. No. So what do? Listen, there is a difference in this account or in this trial balance of how much? My debit seems to be 2 million. My credit seems to be 1.8 million. You have to force the trial balance. Listen, you have to force the trial balance to balance. Whatever is the difference, which in this case is 200, listen, you put it, listen, you put it on the side with a smaller total. The difference, you put it on the side with a smaller total, which is on which side? 200. So that now the trial balance will balance. Listen, with 2 million. Now listen carefully. Meaning, you suspend that difference. You suspend how much? 200,000. You put it in what we call a suspense account. You suspend the 200,000 until a later date, because you can't go back to the books looking for where you committed an error, and yet you're supposed to prepare the P&L account for the company by the end of the year so that you determine the profit of the company. Man, maybe it was only one error that you made in the books. You can't go back and look for transactions, all of them again. No. So what you are required to do as a company is to suspend the difference. Put it in an account we call a suspense account. So get the difference on the debit, get the totals of the debit, get the totals of the credit. If the totals of the credit are less, listen, like in our case here, they were less by 200, you put that amount in a suspense account. And whatever is the difference, you put it on the column with a less amount. So you come and put it in the suspense account. Listen, we call it a suspense account. If the debit was more than the credit, then we say you suspend the amount by transferring it on the credit side of the suspense account. So you normally open an account called suspense. The debit was more than the credit, so you suspend the amount on the credit of the suspense account. If the debit was was less, let's assume now it was the other way. The credit was 2 million while your debit was 1,800. There is a difference of 200. You force the balance to balance. Therefore, you suspend the 200 by putting that difference on the column with a smaller total, which is this debit. How much now? 200. Meaning, you suspend the amount in a suspense account. Okay? Good. So let me assume that it was my original amount, that your trial balance did not balance with the credit side being less by 200. So what did you do? You suspended the 200 by transferring it to the suspense account. Okay? Listen. Meaning you will credit suspense account by how much? 200,000. Listen. Then later, when you discover where you made an error, listen, you go to that account and correct it. Then the other entry, because it's a double entry, you must follow. The other entry now will come to the suspense account. Could be, listen, for the trial balance not to balance and for the credit side to be less by 200, maybe your sales here were undercasted. Maybe your sales were undercasted by 200,000. That's what you discovered later. That the total you took from the sales journal to the sales account, that total was undercasted by 200. So the sales you brought here were less. So when you try to get the column of the debit, of the credit total, you realize it's coming to 1.8. But you don't have to go back to the books to looking for the error again for now. No, you suspended the amount. Okay? When you suspended the amount, you had to put it in a suspense account, 200. Listen, later, when you now come to discover where you made the error, I'm saying now, you correct the error through your suspense account. What happened? Our sales were undercasted. Listen, you all know sales is always a credit balance here. If the sales were later, you realize later they were undercasted. To correct that, you will come and credit a sales account. They were undercasted by how much? 200. So you will credit sales and now you will debit suspense to correct the error. To correct the error. I hope you're following. You will credit the sales and you will debit suspense. Why? Because you suspended the amount initially. Okay? Good. Let me assume that last time when you are trying to balance the trial balance, you realize now the debit was the one which was less. The debit column was the one which was less. What did you do? You suspended the amount by putting it in the suspense account. Meaning now, listen, your suspense account is said to have a debit balance. Meaning it has a balance brought down on the debit here. Later, you later discovered, listen, you later discovered that your purchases or your cashier was undercasted by 200. Your cash was undercasted by 200. So what do? You go open your cash account. Cash is always a debit. If it was undercasted, you correct it by debiting again by 200. Then where is the corresponding credit? You now take it to the suspense account, DOE. You come and say your cash. So what I'm trying to say is this. Listen, we shall do an example later. But once you realize that the trial balance is not balancing, listen, as an accountant, you are required, to suspend the amount in a suspense account. In other words, you transfer the 200,000 to the suspense account. It could be a debit balance or it could be a credit balance, I've explained. Then later when you discover where the error was, you correct that error through the suspense account. You correct the error in the account, but the corresponding entry will now go to the suspense account. Good. So let's put down that information and take another paragraph. We are still discussing the errors which, when they are committed, the trial balance will not balance. So andika hivi somewhere. Another paragraph. Maybe you can say NB. NB. You can say this, NB. If the trial balance does not balance, comma, then the difference should be transferred. Difference should be transferred to the suspense account. Difference should be transferred to the suspense account. The difference should be transferred to the suspense account. The difference should be transferred to the suspense account. By putting the amount on the column, on the column with the lesser amount. By putting the amount on the column with the lesser total. Put it that way. By putting the amount on the column with the lesser total. By putting the amount on the column with a lesser total. Another paragraph. If the error is later discovered, it should be corrected. If the error is later discovered, it should be corrected through the suspense account. It should be corrected later through the suspense account. Good. One more thing before we do a complete example now. One more thing. Listen. We have said, listen, you normally post the entries in the accounts. Listen carefully. Once you post the entries, you normally balance those accounts. We know the procedure. You normally post the entries to the accounts, balance the accounts. Then from balancing, you extract a trial balance. Then I realize my trial balance is not balancing. Let me go back. I realize my trial balance is not balancing. By how much? By 200. What did I do? I suspended the amount in the suspense account. Let me go back and assume it is the original one, the credit, 200. So what did I do? I prepared my suspense account and I put the amount on the credit column of the trial balance, on the credit column of the trial balance. So my suspense account had a credit balance. Okay. Later, I discovered where I went wrong. What did I do? I realized my sales were undercosted. We have agreed sales is always a credit balance. So if my sales were undercosted, I correct it by doing what? By crediting my sales account and I debit suspense account by how much? 200. That way I have corrected the error. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. This error that you committed, obvious, could affect the profit. Remember I said, by the end of the year, you realize that your trial balance is not balancing. Do you have to go back looking for the error so that you correct them, then you come and prepare the profit and loss for the company? No. I said you suspend the amount and continue and prepare the final accounts, which is P&L account and balance sheet. But you committed an error. Listen, if one of the errors you committed, listen carefully, if one of the errors you committed is an item or affects an item that normally goes to the profit and loss, then automatically, listen, automatically, even the profit that you took to you got in the P&L account is also wrong. So you may also be required, some questions may also require you determine the correct profit. Because if sales were wrong and they normally go to the P&L account, then of course when you use wrong sales, automatically even the profit was wrong. Okay? So you may also be required to correct the profit and prepare what we normally call a statement of corrected net profit. You also may be required, some questions require you prepare a statement of corrected net profit. Why you will come and say profit as per accounts. Profit as per accounts. Maybe you got a profit of 5 million. But listen, but you later realize sales were undercosted. When sales are undercosted, is profit overcosted or undercosted? If your sales were undercosted, will that have made your profit to be less than it should be or more than it should be? Obvious. Listen, sales is a revenue. And when revenue are less or income is less, automatically profit will be less. So to correct that, I'll come and add that undercosted sales. Whatever it is, maybe 200. Get whatever it is. Listen, maybe another error you committed. Make your expenses to be, maybe your profit to be more. So whatever profit, whatever error you could have committed and made your profit to be more than it should be, use that error, whichever it is. Listen, it could be an error that affected the double, that could not be disclosed by the trial balance. Like for example, if you had recorded sales, an error of original entry, where you recorded sales of 2,000 as 20,000. The trial balance will still balance. You debited cash by 20,000 and you credited sales by 20,000. But your sales, true sales were 2,000. Will that affect the profit? Yes. Will the trial balance balance? Yes. It's an error of original entry. We mentioned them. So You recorded a cash sales of 2,000 as 20,000. Will that affect the profit? Yes. Sales is a P&L item. Okay? So you asked yourself, you overcasted the sales by how much? Not by 2,000, but by 18,000. You overcasted your sales by 18,000. Because the correct amount should have been 2,000. But you recorded a sale of 20,000. You debited cash by 20, you credited sales by 20. That 20,000 you credited in the sales account went to the income statement. And in the income statement, it went in as an income. So when my sales were overcasted, what effect did it have on my profit? It is obvious, my profit must have also been overcasted. When revenue or income is overcasted, you need to ask yourself, what effect did it have on your profit? That automatically also means it affected your profit. What effect did it have? It made your profit more. So you come and correct whatever it is. Maybe you could say here, overcasted sales. 18,000 you minus. Let me assume those are the only two errors. Let me assume those were the two errors that you committed and affected the P&L account. So this will give you 5.2. Is it 5.2? Yes. If I minus 18, that will give me 5 million. 8. 5. No, 5. This is 52. If I minus 18, this will be now 5,182,000. Good. Now I'm getting that amount. Good. So this is what you can now call corrected net profit. Corrected net profit. So we are saying, listen, out of the errors you have committed, those errors could affect the profit. Not all of the errors may, no, but some of them could affect the profit, and therefore you may be required to compute the true net profit. If the error made the profit less than it should be, listen, I'm saying you add whatever error. If it made your profit more than it should be, whichever error, you minus. Then get what we are calling the corrected net profit. So andika somewhere below that, andika somewhere effects of errors on profit. As a subheading, effects of errors on profit. As a subheading, effects of errors on profits. Effect of errors on profits. Then you say this. Sometimes errors committed may not be discovered by the end of the year. Sometimes errors committed, we are putting down something. Sometimes errors committed may not be discovered by the end of the year. And therefore, the profit that is determined, that year, and therefore the profit that is determined that year will be wrong. Therefore, the profit that is determined that year will be wrong. Will you stop? Continue. If the error is later discovered, then a statement of corrected net profit, is prepared. A statement of corrected net profit is prepared. Good. Then a statement of corrected net profit is prepared. Good. Okay, so maybe for today we can stop there. Next time now we do a few of your past paper questions on how to correct the errors, and if they are asking us to correct the profit, we also correct. So maybe for now we can stop there. We pick it up from there next time, where we shall now do a few of your past paper questions in terms of correction of errors. But otherwise we have talked about types of errors, those which are disclosed and those which are not disclosed by the trial balance. Good. And how to correct some of them, I've been discussing them, how to correct them. Now we have talked about the effect of errors on profit. We have said if the error makes a profit more, subtract. If the error makes a profit less, deduct. Add. That's what we are saying. Good. Otherwise, if the error that was committed made the trial balance not to balance, we have talked about suspense account. You suspend the amount in a suspense account. Okay. See you then. Bye.